several here if you lost yours.
Finished with the notes, I want you to think about this question here: what is a sweatshop, and do they exist today? Most of you have probably heard that term, but we'll talk about what it really means. And then the other question that I had was the word exploitation. What does it mean to exploit someone or something? obviously this section is about workers coming together and fighting against the unfairness of the big businesses that are emerging at this time. So the first section here is even called "Workers are exploited." What does it mean if someone is exploited or someone is exploiting someone else? What is that? Aaron?
Like maybe they're being used or something?
Yeah, basically they're being used. Why? For what purpose? What does that mean? If someone uses someone else, what does that mean? Yeah.
It only benefits the person who's using them.
Yeah, good. It's only benefiting one person. And typically, in the context of working, we have people who use each other like in relationships, that you hear about that all the time, right? And in movies, you used me, right, or whatever. Same thing, it's slightly different though in a work situation, because typically when someone is being exploited or when a group is being exploited, they are powerless to do anything about it. And that's the reason why they're being exploited. So typically it has to do with someone taking advantage of his or her own power and using it to get personal gain from another group. So that's what we mean by exploitation in this context. So for example, as you guys already know, during this time, obviously we have people working really long hours with no benefits at all. What are some examples of benefits that people get from jobs?
Like medical and insurance.
Yeah, health insurance. Other benefits would be like vacation days, or even a set number of work hours per week. We have legal limits for hours that people can work within the United States, especially for people that are under the age of 18. It's very limited. Other benefits would be like, being able to do certain things on holidays, or if you have to work on a holiday, you get paid extra money, which is called overtime, right? So those all have to do with benefits of a job, and these didn't even exist back then. So we're talking late 1800s. And because of all of the machines that are coming into play in the industries in the north, women and children are coming in and they're doing these jobs with the machines and like assembly lines where one person focuses on one little task and they do that repeatedly throughout the day for hours on end. And so for that reason, they're these very tedious jobs that don't require very much skill. Before the invention of all of these machines for, making clothing and things like that, we relied on individual skill to actually make and sew and put together clothing and, just various things for the household and farm equipment and that kind of thing. But now we don't really need people to be skilled, and so not only is this, it's good for business obviously because we can produce a lot, but not so good for the workers, because that means that they can be replaced either by machines or they can be given less money because we're not requiring them to be skilled for their job. So it also does something to one's psyche, I think. If people don't feel like they are contributing in a productive and creative way to society, they begin to feel depressed typically. So that's what happened with a lot of these workers who once were using their skills and their intellect and their creativity in their jobs, and now they don't have to necessarily. So anyway, I want to talk about what a sweatshop is. This section focuses on that kind of work environment, and I don't know who's begun to read the section yet, but what is a sweatshop, or what do you think of when you hear of this term? Aaron?
I think that it may be like a workhouse or something like that are like in really poor conditions, and they make their employees work very hard.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Good. What
Very
else?
little to no pay.
Yeah. Absolutely. What else?
They're not paid a lot, and usually it's really hot.
Mhm.
That's like called like sweatshop.
Right.
And they have to work really long hours.
Right. Good. What else? Maddie?
Would it be like a factory kind of environment?
yeah, typically a factory type setting. Good, so long hours, physically very hot, no benefits. A lot of times also sweatshops they have no regulation from any kind of authority or government. So basically, the owners of the sweatshop can get away with a lot of cruel treatment of their employees. And again, the employees are being exploited in a way because they're desperate for a job. They need to make some sort of money, and maybe they're unskilled, so they have to work, in a factory type setting. So, do we still have sweatshops? Yeah, where?
In China.
Yeah, they've been outlawed in America. We no longer have them, at least not operating legally, that we know of. And there are always like underground operations going on. But yeah, typically you hear about sweatshops. We always joke about like, oh, this is probably made by some 5-year-old kid over in China, our Nike shoes or whatever. But yeah, we still definitely do have sweatshops in various parts of the world where there's not a lot of government regulation. So good in some ways, bad in others. I mean, better, I suppose, than not having any job at all and not bringing in any income, but just very rough conditions to work in a place like that. So then we had seen before, several years back in history, that the farmers were a group who decided to develop these labor unions. And so the purpose of a union is basically to try to protect workers' rights, to give them benefits, to make sure that they're not working 14-hour days, to make sure that if they get injured on the job at a factory, for example, that they'll be taken care of. So a couple of the major unions that came out of this era were the National Labor Union. This still exists today. This was the first one. Sometimes African Americans were not admitted to the National Labor Union, so they decided to develop their own, and they call it the Colored National Labor Union. And then we also have the Knights of Labor. And some of these unions, they all had different tactics for getting what they wanted. Some unions used strikes as their main method of getting their voices out there. And we talked about what striking is before and some of the drawbacks and some of the benefits of it. But the Knights of Labor was an organization that, instead of using strikes and violence to get what they wanted, they used a system called arbitration. And that's where they involved what we call an impartial person to try to settle a debate between the company and the workers. So it's kind of like peer mediation. Here it'd be like if Marie and Paige were having a fight and we needed somebody to kind of intervene, we might bring in somebody who's not friends with them and who's not a family member, obviously, because a family member would be partial, right? Grace would be partial to Marie, and Chloe would be partial to Paige. So we'd bring in somebody that typically doesn't really have any involvement with them, I don't know, one of the other little girls maybe or something. So they would kind of use their own logic to settle the dispute. So it's the same concept as this arbitration strategy. That's used, as another method besides violence of trying to settle problems. So that's typically what is done. Nowadays, some jobs require you to be part of a union, which is not always a good thing, but anyways. Okay, so then a couple of different kinds of unions then. These are some specific names of unions. There are various sorts though. We have what are called craft unions, which is where people that have the same skill set, but they might work at different places, like seamstresses from different clothing companies would all come together. They all have the ability to sew. That's what they have in common, and so they unite in that way. Then we also have industrial unions, which includes everybody within one building or organization. That'd be like all of us and all of the teachers here, academic and ballet faculty coming together. Even though we have different skill sets and we teach different things, we're all in the same organization. So we would unite that way. In the Southwest and in the West, it's mostly agricultural, farming, and so those groups get together for the common good of themselves as well. And then we have a political It's really more of a political philosophy, but it becomes an actual political party as well. This is called socialism, and it's coming out of all of these labor unions, the have and the have-nots of society. And it's based on equal distribution of money, and government control and regulation of business, and business and industry basically. So, and we still have people in America that call themselves socialists. The extreme version of socialism is communism, which is where you have total government control over everyone, and that can get very dangerous and can ruin countries actually. So it's kind of in the middle. It's a middle realm, but basically this socialism is really going against capitalism, which is what the country was founded on. So it's sort of a tricky area. Okay, good. Any questions? Yeah, Maddie?
Can you remind me what capitalism is?
Sure. Okay, yeah. So who can answer that? What is capitalism? The U.S. is a capitalist society. What does that mean for business and politics? Capitalism is basically just the title that we give to the ability to have like free enterprise, meaning organizations and individuals use healthy competition to keep society running. So it's more up to the people than it is to the government, to I guess to say like which businesses are best and who makes the most money and that kind of thing. So the people are more on their own in this way, and the government intervenes really just to protect like basic rights of people, to make sure that everyone's safe and that kind of thing. Yeah. So we'll put the system of free trading, meaning people can do what they want, they don't necessarily have to, not under the thumb of the government, and competition among businesses, among individuals. Actually, our school is a really good example of capitalism, because since we're an independent school, independent organization, we don't have to follow all of the same rules and laws of like a school corporation, which is run by the state government. So they're held responsible for certain things. And the reason that we can work is because we don't have to follow that. So we can set our own hours. We can, we can teach how we want to and the types of things that we feel are important for you guys, rather than the government saying, oh, you have to teach them this way, and you have to give them tests that look like this, and yada, yada, yada. So this is a good thing for us. This is one of the positives of capitalism, and there are negatives as well, of course, just like with every system. There are good things and bad things about it, but this is the main idea that like the founding fathers had when they were first establishing the country, that they wanted it to be a capitalist society so that they had the control. So sometimes it can be a very ruthless society though, because like we were talking about yesterday, the people that aren't naturally able to help themselves kind of get lost in the shuffle here. So it's really survival of the fittest. And a lot of people would argue that capitalism is a very hard system to maintain if you are also a Christian-based society, right? Because one would argue that Christianity is based on everyone loving each other, helping each other out, and capitalism is exactly the opposite of that, right? You're trying to get yourself up there to the top. So there's been a lot of debates about this, and there's a lot of conflict there morally, right, and psychologically. But obviously America is one of the most powerful and helpful nations in the world. I think for as many faults as we have, we really have probably done the most to help out other countries around the world, because we're able to, we have the money, we have the education, we have the technology, and we owe a lot of that to the capitalist society. So Okay, good. I'm glad we discussed what this was. And if there ever, please don't ever feel like you're asking a dumb question by, you know, I think, I'm throwing around terms and I'm assuming that everyone knows what they are, but if you don't, please let me know, because I don't want you to be confused. And there are some terms where I have to go back and remind myself of what they are, so please ask if you're not sure.
Can I get a short definition of communism as well?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Erase this here. Okay. Okay, communism is an extreme form of socialism where typically there's one major leader, so it almost becomes a dictatorship, but sometimes it's just a main group of central government. But the government, it has complete control over all business matters, over individuals in their daily lives. Has anybody ever, have you guys read 1984?
We're reading that right now.
Are you reading that right now?
Yeah,
Okay. That's kind of, that might be considered a fascist society too, where you have one person ruling it. But anyway, they're similar though. And not only does the government have control over the business sector and education, but also over what people are doing in their lives, including within their homes and in their relationships. It's regulating everything. And the idea behind this is that there's a positive intention behind communism, which is that we want everyone to have an equal playing field, and we want everyone to have, you know, a certain set amount of money and certain opportunities. However, this can obviously become very dangerous because you're eliminating people's individual freedoms and you're taking away their ability to choose what they want to do with their lives. Over in China, actually, in the 1980s even, they suffered from this communist revolution that was going on where the books that people were reading were controlled by the government. In fact, they started not allowing young girls to go to school. I read a book about this in college. It was a novel where this young girl worked in a Chinese sweatshop making clothes, and she would sneak away to read. And I thought, oh my gosh, you know, this is something very odd for us, right? American students sneaking away to read. We have trouble getting them to read, but anyway, so our family gets in trouble and she loses her job. The government finds out that she's been reading. And so, you know, and it's one of those things where if the government can keep the masses uneducated, then they can keep them powerless to do anything. So this was definitely a prime example of exploiting the people who live in one region so that they can't rise up against the government. So whenever communism has tried to install itself in a whole country or in a whole society, throughout the course of history, it's never worked out well. It's always ended in either war or just complete loss of freedoms for people. It just hasn't worked out well at all. So, like I said, the ideas behind it are, you know, some would say positive, but actually in application, in practical application, it hasn't worked. So, so that's what that means. And